14 months ago, I drove 45 minutes north on I-77 for what my mother called a family planning meeting, and I brought a folder with me. Color-coded tabs, bank statements, a cash flow projection I had run the night before on my laptop while my roommate watched TV in the next room. I thought they finally wanted my help with the books. My name is Joss, I'm 31 years old, and I'm a financial analyst at a logistics firm in Charlotte. I have been doing math since before it was my job. Numbers always came easier to me than most things, including knowing when to stop giving money to people who were spending it without looking at me. The business my grandmother built had been bleeding quietly for 4 years. She opened it in 1993, a catering operation, out of a commercial kitchen she rented on Tuesdays and Thursdays, making cakes and spreads for weddings and church events and retirement parties all across Mecklenburg County. She called it Sadie's Table, after herself, and she ran it with a green canvas ledger and a phone she kept in her apron pocket. When she died 4 years ago, my parents inherited it. The name, the clientele, the equipment, the debt, and zero experience running any of it. My brother Ward stepped in as the face of the business. He's 28. He takes good photos and he is warm, and he remembers people's names and their children's names, and whether they prefer fondant or buttercream. Clients love him. He is not, and has never been, someone who knows what a line of credit costs per month. That has never bothered Ward, because there was always someone else handling the cost. Welcome back to Peaceful Drama Stories, where family secrets surface and quiet people finally find their voice. Grab your coffee, settle in. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from today, because this one started in a parking lot in April, and it ends with a green ledger and 3 words that changed everything. The equipment loan on the commercial mixer and refrigeration unit came due 6 months after my grandmother died. The balance was $34,000. My parents couldn't get approved on their own. The interest rate alone would have eaten whatever margin they had. I co-signed. I told myself it was temporary. I said 6 months. Maybe 8. While the business stabilized, while they learned the software, while Ward figured out the invoicing system I had set up for them. What happened instead was that I became the floor they stood on without checking whether anyone was holding it up. The loan payment was $610 a month. My parents could cover it most months, not the months when a large event canceled, or when the refrigeration unit needed service, or when the booking season went quiet. So we developed a system that was never spoken out loud. I would check in every few weeks, ask how things were going, and my mother would tell me, without telling me what the shortfall was. She'd say something like, "It's been a tight month since the Holloway wedding got postponed," and I would say, "How much?" And she would give me a number, and I would transfer it that night. In 4 years I transferred $31,400 on top of being a cosigner. I know the number exactly. I'm a financial analyst. I know every number exactly. I also covered the payroll tax penalty when they filed late 2 years running. $2,800 the first time, $1,500 the second. I set them up on accounting software. I filed their quarterly estimates for 18 months before my mother said they had it handled. I quietly kept checking because I knew they didn't. I was not naive. I understand sunk cost. I know the difference between an investment and a subsidy. I know you should never extend credit you can't afford to lose. I knew all of this. I kept paying because I was 27 when my grandmother died. And I still believed that useful daughters get remembered for being useful. The folder in my passenger seat had 7 color-coded tabs. My mother had said, "Bring whatever you have on the accounts," she said. "We need you there," she said. Planning meeting. I took a half day off work, drove 45 minutes, and rehearsed helpful things to say on the way up. The lawyer's name was Mr. Farrow. He had an office above a dry cleaner on Commerce Street, the kind that smells like paper and careful decisions. When I arrived, my brother Ward was already seated with a coffee. My aunt, my mother's older sister, was there in her going-out blazer. My parents sat at the head of the table, And my father was staring at the window the way he stares at engines that aren't cooperating. There wasn't a cup of coffee waiting for me. Mr. Farrow opened his folder and explained, in the tone of a man reading coordinates for a storm hitting someone else's county, that my parents had decided to restructure Sadie's table. Effective immediately, Ward would be the sole owner and operator. His name on the business license, the kitchen lease, all vendor contracts. The business would be his. He looked at me over his reading glasses. The intention, he said carefully, is to keep the operation in the family. My aunt smoothed her blazer and said the line she had clearly practiced on the drive over. Ward is there every single day. That's what ownership looks like. My mother looked at me, and her eyes were warm, and she said, "You have your career, honey. Ward needs this, you don't." I looked at my brother. Ward had his hands around his coffee cup, and he was not quite meeting my eyes. Not guilty. Not meeting. More like, already past it. Already in the chapter where this was settled. I said one thing. I said I'm still on the equipment loan. My mother said, "We know, sweetheart. Ward will take over those responsibilities." Now, I want you to understand something about that sentence, because it matters more than anything else said in that room. I have run the numbers on a lot of things in my career. Restructurings, asset transfers that looked clean until you checked the underlying liabilities. What my mother was describing was not a transition plan. It was a wish. Ward had no qualifying credit history to assume that loan. The bank would not release me without a replacement cosigner who could qualify, and nobody in that room had thought to verify whether that was possible. I sat with that information for about 4 seconds. Then I thanked Mr. Farrow for his time, picked up my folder of tabs nobody had asked to see, and said I had to get back to Charlotte for a deadline. Which was even true. The room went quiet in a way rooms do when someone skips the scene they were supposed to cry in. I was almost to my car when my father came out after me. He's 63. He came down those stairs faster than a man with his kind of chest history should, and when he reached me, he had to put one hand on my trunk and breathe. 3 steps and a railing, and they emptied him. I understood, without either of us using the word cardiologist, that things were worse than what they'd been telling me. "Joss," he said. I waited. "Your mother and your aunt, once they've made up their minds about something." He stopped. He shook his head once, slow. "Ward needs a win." That was the entire defense of his silence. 31 years, and that was the sentence. He reached into his jacket pocket and pressed something into my hand. A small brass key. The spare to the commercial kitchen my grandmother had used, the one my parents had kept on their ring since she died. "In case you ever need to get in there," he said. "Think." My father has never said the word sorry to me in his life. He hands people keys instead. I put it on my keychain without a word. He patted my shoulder twice, like a period at the end of a sentence he hadn't finished writing, and went back inside. I sat in my car and looked at the key, and looked at the loan notification sitting in my email, and I drove home with the radio off. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water I wasn't drinking, opened my banking app, and ran the report I had been avoiding for 4 years. I call it reconciliation. You take the 2 sides of a ledger and you make them agree. The left side, what went out. The right side, what came back. The left side had 47 separate transfers, the $610 months, the tax penalties, the $400 I wired when the old mixer died and the replacement deposit was due in 3 days, all of it in a column that went further back than I wanted to see. The right side had my name on a loan I couldn't exit without a qualified replacement. It had a business that now legally belonged to my brother. It had one sentence: "Ward will take over those responsibilities," spoken by a woman who had not texted once in the 3 hours since I left that room. In accounting, there's a term: uncollectible. It's the moment you stop classifying something as an asset and admit it's a loss, you write it down. The books finally tell the truth. I put my phone face down and went to bed, Because I have one rule I have never once broken. I do not make five-figure decisions in the dark when I am still in the feeling. I learned that from my job, and it has never failed me. Saturday morning. Coffee, laptop. The loan. I called the bank and requested the cosigner release documentation. They told me what I already knew. I'd need an attorney and a formal process. I made a note. The monthly shortfall transfer. I went into my bill pay and deleted the recurring reminder I had set for myself. I did not transfer anything. I wrote nothing to explain it. The accounting software subscription I had been paying, canceled. The quarterly tax filing reminder, I set for myself every March and September, so I could check whether they'd filed in time, removed from my calendar. 40 minutes, start to finish, 4 years unwound over a second cup of coffee. I didn't send a message. I didn't write the email I had drafted in my head on the drive home. They had made their arrangements in a lawyer's office, without consulting me. I made mine at my kitchen table without involving them. That felt right. That felt like the same energy, finally pointed in the same direction. Then I went for a run, first one in 2 months. I came home and made eggs and read the entire Sunday paper sitting at my actual table like a person who had nowhere to be. Here is what happened over the next 3 weeks. Nothing. That is the plot twist, and I want you to sit with it. No call to say, that must have been hard to hear in that room. No text from my brother. No message from my aunt. My mother sent me exactly one thing in 3 weeks. A photo of a tiered cake ward had decorated for a client, captioned, "Doesn't he do beautiful work?" I liked the photo because I wasn't ready yet to be the kind of person who doesn't. 3 weeks of silence ran a cleaner audit than anything I could have designed on a spreadsheet. Every call I used to get before had been attached to a number. The shortfall this month. The vendor is asking. The freezer is making a sound again. The calls with no number attached had quietly stopped at some point. And I had been too busy answering the ones with numbers to notice. If you've ever been the one who keeps paying while someone else keeps receiving, tell me in the comments what finally made you stop. Because I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. Because what my brother texted me on a Tuesday morning is why I'm telling this story at all. I was at my desk halfway through a client deliverable when my phone buzzed face up next to my keyboard. My brother's name. The loan payment came back insufficient funds. What did you do? No hello. No context. The tone you'd use texting a customer service department about a billing error. I sat with it. My tea went cold. I thought about 47 transfers. I thought about a room with 2 cups of coffee already poured, and none for me. I thought about the phrase, "Word will take over those responsibilities," hanging in the air of a lawyer's office, while I stood there, holding a folder nobody wanted. I typed a long response about the meeting, and the 4 years, and the loan documentation, and what a cosigner release actually requires. I deleted it. I typed a shorter one about the math, deleted that too. Explaining yourself to people who benefit from not understanding you is just another transfer, and I had canceled my transfers. So I wrote the only true thing, and I sent it before I could reconsider. Not my business. I put my phone in my desk drawer and finished my workday. My hands were almost steady the whole time. 17 minutes later, the calls started. My brother first, then my mother, then a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be my aunt calling from her husband's phone because she had assumed I'd blocked her. I had not blocked anyone. Blocking is loud. Blocking is still a conversation, just a one-sided one. I wanted the other thing. The silence that simply doesn't show up. My family had never given me that. I had decided to give it to myself. My mother's messages came in stages, like weather moving through. First, logistics. Joss, the payment bounced. We need to sort this out, call me. Second, by evening, this isn't funny, Ward has a corporate event this weekend. Third, the next morning, the one I had been for, the way you wait for a storm the forecast already called. After everything this family has sacrificed for you. I read that sentence twice sitting on my kitchen floor, and I laughed once, one dry sound completely alone. Fourth stage arrived through my aunt, who called from her own phone eventually. She used her committee chairwoman voice. Family is not a transaction, Joss. You don't get to opt in and out based on whether the arrangement suits you. I said, okay, at appropriate intervals. Is that all you're going to say? I think so. She told me I was making Ward's livelihood collateral for a grudge. She told me I was hurting my mother, who had, by her account, cried all weekend. She told me ungrateful was not a word she wanted to use, while using it very clearly. Calm is free, and it makes a certain kind of person absolutely furious. I will not pretend I didn't find that useful. By the following week, a version of me was circulating through the extended family. Joss, doing well in Charlotte, pulling support over hurt feelings, letting a family legacy collapse out of spite. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years texted, heard you walked away from the business. That's cold. Nobody in that version mentioned the 47 transfers, because nobody knew. I had kept it quiet out of some idea about dignity. You don't help people to get credit for helping, you just help. And now the invisibility I had designed was the entire case against me. One person broke pattern. My uncle, my father's younger brother, a retired electrician who texts in complete sentences and means every word, sent me a message that said, "There are 2 sides to every ledger, kid. Call me when you're ready." I stood in my kitchen and cried for about 4 minutes. Then I stopped, because he would have wanted me to check the numbers first. My father called that Thursday. He does not call. He said there was a diner on Albemarle Road he liked, 11 o'clock, just us. He was in the corner booth with decaf he wasn't supposed to have. He slid me a laminated menu like a peace offering. For a while he talked about nothing, a neighbor's fence, a carburetor he was rebuilding. Then he set his cup down and told me something I had never known in 31 years. When my grandmother started Sadie's table, my aunt was the original co-founder. They had planned it together, pooled money, rented the kitchen space jointly. 8 months in, my aunt had a better opportunity through her husband's family and walked away. She took her capital. There was no formal dissolution, no repayment discussion. She was simply there and then she wasn't. My grandmother rebuilt alone. It took 3 years to get back to even. She never mentioned my aunt's name in connection with the business again. She just kept the green ledger and moved forward. She didn't chase what left, my father said. She built bigger without it. He reached into the bag he'd brought and set something on the table. The green canvas ledger, the original one. I had seen it as a child, assumed it was lost when Nana died. My hands went still. "Last page," he said. I opened it. Her handwriting, cramped and slanted right, the way it always was. Final entries from her last operating year, and then, on the very last page, not a business entry, a note, written like she'd set the pen down and sat for a minute deciding something. If this book ever makes it to Joss, and I hope it does, she should know I watched her watch these numbers for 20 years, and she always saw what the rest of us missed. Sadie's table was mine. A real table should be hers someday, when she's ready to sit at the head of it. I had to put the ledger down on the table. My father didn't say a word. He drank his decaf and looked out at the parking lot, the way he always looks at problems he's working through sideways. He has spent his whole life in the same county as feelings he doesn't know how to say out loud. I had learned a long time ago to hear the ones he handed me instead. "Give me a little time," he said when he stood to leave. "I'm going to fix some of this." He never got it. 2 weeks later, my uncle called me from a hospital waiting room. My father's chest, the chest pains he had been carrying quietly for months, had turned into a cardiology appointment that turned into an overnight admission. Not a crisis, the doctor said. A serious warning. I drove up that night. My mother saw me come off the elevator, and I watched her face do the math in 3 steps. Relief, then recalculation, then something that looked like shame, the kind that surfaces when a person realizes they've been calling you only when the number didn't add up. The first thing she said to me across that hallway was, "Did you bring the account information?" I stood very still. "I brought myself," I said. "That's what's left." And I walked down the hall and sat with my father until the monitors found their rhythm. And the window light shifted from black to gray. What happened after that was slower and louder than I expected. My uncle started asking questions. He is a man who troubleshoots rather than argues, and his first question was the right one. If the business was viable, why couldn't Ward qualify to assume the loan independently? That question led to another question, which led to a Sunday afternoon, where my uncle and two cousins were looking at loan documentation they had never thought to ask for. The transfers were in the bank records. "I don't do cash, I do statements." My uncle called me that evening. He said, "You paid for the table they set without you." He handed me back my phone like it was evidence, which it was. The story in my family reversed itself inside of 2 weeks. The cousin who texted "That's cold" sent me a paragraph apology I read 3 times. My aunt went quiet, which is the closest she has ever come to an admission. One of my mother's friends from church, Mrs. Haverford, who has known our family for 20 years, sent me a card that said she was glad someone had finally told the truth. Ward called me. He did not apologize. He said, "I didn't know about all of it." I said I believed him, I do. Ward is not calculating. He just never looked, and nobody ever made him look. 5 months after the Commerce Street meeting, Mr. Farrow's office called. I already knew the shape of it. There are only so many exits on a road like that. Same table, same light. My mother, my aunt, Ward, Mr. Farrow. This time someone had thought to pour a cup of coffee for me. The offer, if I resumed the monthly transfers and maintained the co-signature through the next 18 months of stabilization, my name would be added to the business as a co-owner. Already drafted. Sitting in a folder 11 inches from my hand. Everything I had wanted 4 years ago, before I understood what wanting it was going to cost. My mother reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. Her hands were warm, the way they have always been warm, and she said, "You see, honey, it was always going to be yours too. Nothing changes, sweetheart. Nothing changes." The exact sentence from the parking lot, returned now as comfort. Every person at that table thought they were watching a reconciliation. I was the only one who could see the price tag still attached. I set an envelope on the table. My mother opened it. Inside was a 2-page legal document my attorney had prepared. A formal cosigner release request, already filed with the bank, citing the unauthorized business transfer as a material change to the loan's underlying structure. The bank had 90 days to process it. Also inside, a photocopy of the last page of the green ledger, my grandmother's handwriting, the note she had written about me. "I'm not resuming transfers," I said, in the voice I use for difficult client presentations, because that voice is the truest thing I own. "I'm not accepting the co-ownership. What I am doing is this. My name comes off that loan through proper legal process. You'll work with the bank on the terms, or you won't. But this arrangement ends here." My aunt came out of her chair. She said things that collapsed under their own weight before she could finish them. The sentences kept falling apart, and I understood watching her that her fury wasn't really about the money, or the 18 months, or the transfers. It was about the exit. I had found one, and if I could find it, it had always been there, which meant everyone who stayed had chosen to stay, and she had been choosing, quietly, for 40 years, and the choosing had been optional all along. Ward said, from his end of the table quietly, "She's not wrong." My aunt looked at him. He lifted one shoulder. "She's not." My mother had gone still. She was looking at the ledger page, at her own mother's handwriting. "She always said you had a mind for the numbers," she said, almost to herself. "I know," I said, "she told me." I thanked Mr. Farrow and I walked out of that office, past the dry cleaner smell and down into the January air, and I did not look back. And losing everything I'd thought I wanted felt exactly like being able to breathe. The business was restructured over the following 4 months. Ward negotiated with a restaurant supply company that wanted a catering division. They bought the name and equipment at a fair price. The loan was retired in the settlement. My cosigner status ended on a Tuesday, with a letter I read alone at my kitchen table over coffee I didn't share with anyone. Ward is operating the catering side under the new arrangement. He is good at the client relationships, and he always was. I genuinely hope he does well. My mother and I have a call most Sundays now, half an hour, sometimes less. We talk about her neighbor's garden and what she's watching, and when she is feeling brave, she asks about my work. She has not apologized in so many words. Some Sundays she calls first, and I have decided to let that be what it is. Small. Honest. Both of those things at once, which it never was before. Last spring I signed a lease. A studio space on a quiet street in Noda, 2 windows, good light, enough room for a desk, and a client chair and a bookshelf I did not have to share with anyone. I put my grandmother's green ledger on the second shelf, where I can see it from where I sit. The co-signer release letter is in the drawer below, in case I ever need to remember that paperwork is not cold. Paperwork is just love that doesn't depend on the other person's memory. My uncle came to see the space the week I moved in. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at the ledger on the shelf and didn't say much, which is how I know he meant everything. "She'd have liked this," he said. "I know," I said. He handed me a coffee from the place downstairs, and we stood there in the new light for a while, not talking, the way people do when a room finally belongs to the right person. Most evenings now I sit at my own desk in my own space, and I do work that is mine. The payment I used to wire north every month goes into my business account. Same money, different direction, like a river that finally found its bed. And if there's one thing I would tell anyone doing what I was doing, paying quietly into something that learned to count on your presence without counting you as a person, it's this. The day you stop is not the day you fail them. It's the first day you show up for yourself. That's my story. 47 transfers, a green ledger, and 3 words that cost me everything I'd been told I couldn't live without, and gave me everything I hadn't known to want yet. If someone in your life is treating your love like a standing invoice, you are allowed to close the account. Tell me in the comments what you would have done at that table. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.